I never imagined that the sound of a pen scratching against paper could be louder than a mortar impact. I never imagined that the most painful wound I would receive in 3 tours of duty wouldn't come from shrapnel or a sniper's bullet, but from a cheap black ballpoint pen held by a man who had never seen combat a day in his life. I sat there, staring at the synthetic wood grain of the desk, my hands resting on my knees, trying to keep them from shaking. Not from fear, never from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice water in my veins. Across the desk, Captain Thorne didn't even look me in the eye. He was too busy signing the last of the triplicate forms that would end my career. He had that smug look on his face, the kind of half-smile a man wears when he thinks he's crushed a bug that was buzzing too close to his ear. He wasn't just discharging me, he was erasing me. General discharge under honorable conditions, he had called it earlier, playing with the words like they were a gift, but we both knew what it really was. It was a stamp of incompetence. It was a label that said I didn't fit. It was a lie wrapped in official letterhead. "You're a liability specialist," Thorne muttered, finally capping the pen with a sharp click. The sound echoed in the small, air-conditioned office, bouncing off the walls that were covered in maps he didn't know how to read and commendations he hadn't earned. "You question orders. You disrupt unit cohesion. You think, because you've been on a few deployments, you know better than the chain of command." He finally looked up, his eyes empty and arrogant. "Well, the chain of command has decided. You're done. Transport leaves at 1400 hours. You'll ride along with the supply convoy to the airfield. From there, you're a civilian. You're someone else's problem." I stood up. I wanted to lung across that desk. I wanted to grab him by his pristine collar and scream the truth into his face, that the only reason he was kicking me out was because I had corrected him on the perimeter patrols, because I had pointed out the gaps in his security plan that would get us all killed, but I didn't. I had learned the hard way that truth doesn't matter when power decides to be deaf. I simply saluted, a slow, deliberate motion that I poured every ounce of my remaining dignity into. He didn't return it. He just waved his hand, dismissing me like a stray dog. I walked out of that office into the blinding sun of the base, the heat hitting me like a physical blow. The dust tasted like copper and old diesel. I looked around at the base I had helped build, at the soldiers I had trained, at the flag snapping in the dry wind. I was being exiled. I was being thrown out with the garbage. I didn't know it then, standing there with my career in ashes. But Captain Thorne hadn't just signed my discharge papers. He had signed his own death warrant. And the convoy he was sending me home on? It wasn't a ride to the airfield, it was a funeral procession, and I was the only one who could see the grave. The base, Outpost Vulture, was a scars on the earth kind of place. It sat in a valley that acted like a funnel for every insurgent rocket and mortar team within 50 miles. It was a grinder. You didn't come here to win hearts and minds. You came here to survive the rotation. I had spent 6 months here, watching the leadership crumble under the pressure, while the enlisted men held the line with duct tape and grit. I walked back to my hooch, the temporary barracks made of plywood and sandbags. The walk felt different this time. Usually I walked with a purpose, scanning the horizon, checking the wire. Today, I walked like a ghost. I passed privates who wouldn't look me in the eye. I passed sergeants who suddenly found something very interesting to look at on their boots. They knew, in a unit this small, bad news travels faster than sound. They knew Miller was out. They knew Thorne had won. And the worst part wasn't the anger, it was the silence. The brotherhood I had bled for, the men I had pulled out of kill zones in previous deployments, they were silent. They were afraid that if they stood next to me, Thorne's target would shift to them. I couldn't blame them. Thorne was a vindictive, petty tyrant who used paperwork as a weapon. He couldn't shoot straight, he froze under fire. But give him a counseling form and he was a sniper. He had systematically dismantled anyone who threatened his ego. I was just the last one standing, the last old-school soldier who remembered how things were supposed to be done. I reached my bunk and started packing. It's a strange feeling, packing up your life while your unit prepares for a mission. I could hear the engines of the MR apps, the mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, rumbling to life in the motor pool. The deep, guttural growl of diesel engines usually signaled focus, adrenaline, a mission. Today, it just sounded like a clock ticking down. I folded. My uniforms, the fabric faded from the sun and stiff with dried sweat. I packed my pictures. I packed the few letters I hadn't burned. Corporal Hayes walked in then. Hayes was a good kid, young, eager, but easily cowed. He was the witness to everything. The guy who saw Thorne berate me for insubordination when I told him sending a patrol down Route Copper was suicide. Hayes had been there. He had seen the intel reports I slapped on the map. He had seen Thorne tear them up. "Miller?" "Hayes," said, his voice quiet. He looked at the floor, shifting his weight. I heard about the discharge. It's messed up, man. It is what it is, Hayes," I said, not looking up from my duffel bag. I didn't want his pity. Pity is useless in war. "Just keep your head down. Don't let him bait you. Thorne is leading the convoy to the airfield himself," Hayes whispered, glancing at the door to make sure we were alone. "Says he wants to inspect the logistics lines, but we all know he just wants to make sure you actually leave." I paused. Thorne was leading the convoy. That was unusual. Thorne hated leaving the wire. He preferred the safety of the toque, the tactical operations center, where the air conditioning was cold and the coffee was hot. If he was coming, it was for a victory lap. He wanted to see me walk up that ramp onto the C-130. He wanted to savor the moment he flushed me out of his army. "Let him come," I said, zipping the bag shut. The sound was final. Maybe he'll learn something. But inside, my stomach twisted. Thorne on a convoy was a liability. He panicked on the radio. He micromanaged the drivers. He hesitated at intersections. And today, the intel was bad. I knew it. I had felt it in the air for days. The locals had been too quiet. The markets were empty. The kids who usually threw rocks or asked for candy were gone. The valley was holding its breath. And Thorne, in his arrogance, was leading a supply column right down the throat of the beast, with me, sitting in the back, as cargo. The betrayal didn't start with the discharge papers. It started 3 months ago, the day Thorne arrived. He came in with shiny boots and a chest full of ribbons from training exercises, talking about new standards and optics. He didn't care about combat effectiveness. He cared about how the reports looked to the colonel back at battalion. I remembered the first time we clashed. It was a briefing on sector security. I had pointed out that our observation posts were blind at night because of the terrain features. I suggested moving Bravo Post up the ridge. It was basic tactics. Thorne had looked at me like I had spoken in tongues. "Specialist Miller," he had said, his voice dripping with condescension in front of the entire platoon. "I have a degree in military strategy. You have a rifle. I suggest you stick to cleaning yours and let me handle the thinking." That was the start. From that day on, I was the enemy. He assigned me the worst details. He denied my leave when my father got sick. He wrote me up for uniforms that were dirty after a 12-hour patrol. He tried to break me. He wanted me to snap, to hit him, to give him a reason to court-martial me. But I didn't give him that satisfaction. I took every punishment with a stone face. I did every latrine duty, every burning of the waste barrels, every sleepless guard shift. But the real break, the final nail, was the intel report last week. I had cultivated a source in the local village, an old man who sold goats. He told me the insurgents were moving heavy weapons into the red zone, a narrow pass on the main supply route. I brought the info to Thorne. I bypassed the chain of command because it was urgent. Thorne had laughed. He actually laughed. "You think a goat herder knows more than our drone feeds, Miller? You're paranoid. You're seeing ghosts because you're burned out." He threw the report in the trash. "That route is green. We've driven it 10 times this month. That's exactly why they'll hit it," I argued, my voice rising. "We're predictable, sir. They're watching the pattern. They're waiting for a high-value target or a heavy convoy. Get out of my office," Thorne had snapped. "And Miller, one more outburst and you're done." He wasn't bluffing. He filed the paperwork that night. Loss of confidence, inability to adapt, toxic attitude. He built a paper trail of lies so thick that by the time it reached battalion, I looked like a cancer. In the unit. And the system, the great bureaucratic machine of the military, believed the captain with the degree over the specialist with the dirt under his fingernails. So here I was, betrayed not by the enemy, but by my own uniform. The brotherhood I believed in had a cancer at the top, and instead of cutting out the tumor, they were cutting off the healthy limb. I felt a deep, profound loneliness as I hauled my gear toward the motor pool. I was surrounded by men I would have died for, and yet I was completely alone. They were staying. I was leaving. They were soldiers. I was just a civilian in camouflage, waiting for the clock to run out. The sun was at its peak when we formed up at the vehicles. The heat was oppressive, a physical weight that pressed down on your shoulders. The convoy consisted of 4 vehicles, a lead MRAP with a mine roller, 2 heavy cargo trucks carrying supplies and outgoing equipment, and a rear gun truck, another MRAP. I was assigned to the third vehicle, the second cargo truck. I wasn't allowed in a turret. I wasn't allowed to drive. I was supernumerary, cargo. I threw my bags into the back of the LMTV, the light-medium tactical vehicle, and climbed into the passenger seat of the cab. The driver was a kid named Private Davis. He looked nervous. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. "Specialist Miller," Davis said, nodding nervously. "Sorry to see you go, man." "Eyes on the road, Davis," I said, my voice automatic. I couldn't turn off the NCO switch in my brain, even if they had stripped the authority away. "Watch your intervals. Keep 50 meters. Don't let the lead truck get too far ahead." Thorne came strutting down the line before we rolled out. He was wearing his full kit, looking pristine. He stopped at my truck and banged on the door. I rolled down the heavy armored window. "Comfortable, Miller?" Thorne asked, grinning behind his ballistic sunglasses. "Just ready to go, sir," I said, staring straight ahead. "Enjoy the ride," he said. "Try not to distract the driver. I want a clean run, no drama. You're a civilian the moment you step off at the airfield. Until then, you sit there and shut up. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal, sir." He walked away, tapping the side of the truck with his baton. He climbed into the lead MRAP, of course. He took the safest vehicle, the one with the most armor, the one with the mine roller. He put himself in the bubble and left the soft-skinned cargo trucks exposed in the middle. It was cowardice masked as command. "Mount up." The order came over the radio. I put on my headset, though I wasn't supposed to talk. I just wanted to listen. I wanted to hear the net. I needed to know what was happening. We rolled out of the gate, the heavy steel barriers sliding back to let us into the wild. The moment we left the wire, the feeling hit me. It's a sensation every combat veteran knows. The pucker factor. The air felt too still. The road looked too empty. I scanned the horizon, my eyes moving from the ridgeline to the culverts, looking for the telltale signs of an IED, disturbed earth, wires, piles of trash that hadn't been there yesterday. We drove for 20 minutes in silence. The radio was chatty with Thorne micromanaging the spacing. "Vehicle 2, close it up. You're lagging. Vehicle 4, watch your 6. Gunner 1, scan left." I saw movement. Never mind, it's a dog. He was jumpy. He was nervous. He was projecting his fear onto the convoy. I looked at the map on my knee, not an official one, just a sketch I had made from memory. We were approaching the red zone, the pass I had warned him about. It was a stretch of road with high canyon walls on both sides. A classic kill zone. If they hit the front and rear vehicles, the middle trucks, my truck, would be trapped like rats in a barrel. "Davis," I said, my voice low, "unlock your door." "What?" Davis looked at me, confused. "Sarge, we're moving. Unlock the..." "Damn door, Davis," I snapped. "And keep your weapon off safe. Finger outside the trigger guard, but ready." "Why? Did you see something?" Panic crept into his voice. "Just do it." I checked my own rifle. They had let me keep it for the transport, mostly because per regulation, every soldier in a combat zone must be armed, even if they're being discharged. I racked the charging handle, ensuring a round was chambered. I checked my magazines. I loosened the straps on my body armor. I looked out the window. The canyon walls were closing in. Shadows stretched across the road. It was the perfect place for an ambush. I looked up at the ridges. High ground. The enemy always takes the high ground. And then I saw it. Just a glint. A flash of sunlight reflecting off glass. A scope? Binoculars? "Contact front," I screamed, forgetting I wasn't supposed to talk. I keyed the mic. "Contact front. High right ridge. RPG. Miller, get off the net." Thorne's voice screamed in my ear. "Maintain radio." "Silence. You are not." Boom. The world disintegrated. The explosion wasn't a sound. It was a change in atmospheric pressure that punched the air out of my lungs. The ground shook so violently that my head slammed against the doorframe. Dust, instant and blinding, filled the cab. "I'm hit! I'm hit!" Davis was screaming. I looked over. The windshield was spiderwebbed, but intact. Davis was clutching his face, blood streaming from his nose where he'd hit the steering wheel, but he was alive. "Drive, Davis! Push through!" I roared, grabbing the wheel to steady him, but we couldn't move. The vehicle in front of us, the other cargo truck, was a burning wreck. The RPG I had seen hadn't been aimed at us. It had hit the fuel tank of the truck ahead, Black smoke billowed into the sky, choking out the sun. Then the machine guns opened up. It was a wall of sound. Crack, thump, crack, thump. Bullets hammered against the armored sides of our truck like hail. I heard the pinging of rounds, hitting the chassis. We were taking effective fire from both sides of the canyon. A complex ambush. L-shaped. They had us in the kill box. "Rear truck, push up! Push up!" Thorne was screaming on the radio. His voice was high, pitched with terror. "Get us out of here! Return fire!" But the rear truck wasn't moving. I looked in the side mirror. The rear MRAP had taken a hit to the axle. It was disabled. We were boxed in. Burning truck in front, disabled truck in back. And Thorne's lead MRAP? It was sitting there, 50 meters ahead, its turret spinning wildly, firing into the rocks without a target. "Command, this is Vulture 6. We are under heavy fire. Grid. Thorne was hyperventilating. He had forgotten the grid coordinates. He was panicking. We were dying. Right there, on the radio, I could hear the unit dissolving. Soldiers were screaming for medics. The gunner in the rear truck was calling out targets but getting no direction. Thorne had frozen, the man with the degree. In strategy was paralyzed by the reality of war. I looked at Davis. He was curled up under the dashboard, sobbing. "Give me your radio," I said. I didn't ask. I ripped the handset from his vest. I wasn't a specialist anymore. I wasn't a civilian in waiting. I wasn't the guy who got fired. In that moment, surrounded by fire and incompetence, I was the only thing standing between these men and a massacre. I kicked the door open. The heat and noise rushed in. "Miller, what are you doing?" Davis screamed. "Where loyalty ends, Davis." I gritted my teeth, sliding out into the chaos. Justice begins. I dropped to the gravel, the stones biting into my knees. The air was thick with the smell of burning rubber and cordite. Bullets kicked up spurts of dust inches from my boots. I crawled under the truck, using the engine block as cover. I assessed the situation in 3 seconds. 1. The enemy was on the high ridge, focusing fire on the gun trucks. 2. The convoy was immobilized. 3. Air. Support was our only chance, but Thorne couldn't call it in because he was losing his mind. I keyed the mic. "All stations, this is Vulture 3 actual. Break. Vulture 6 is ineffective. I am assuming control of the net. Acknowledgement required." Silence. Then, a shaky voice. It was Hayes in the rear truck. "Roger. 3 actual. We have 3 casualties, taking heavy fire from the East Ridge. Hayes, suppress the East Ridge. Cyclic rate. Keep their heads down. Don't worry about ammo. Conservation. Just pour it on. Roger." The 50 cal in the rear opened up. A rhythmic thump, thump, thump that sounded like the heartbeat of God. "Vulture 1. I called the lead truck. Thorne's truck. "Driver, listen to me. Drop the ramp. Get your dismounts out and establish a base of fire to the north. Do it now." Negative. Thorne's voice cut in. "Stay in the vehicle. Miller, you are unauthorized. You are..." "Captain, shut the hell up or we all die," I screamed into the mic. "Driver, if you don't drop that ramp and return fire, they are going to come down here and cut our throats. Drop the ramp." The ramp dropped. The squad spilled out, taking cover behind the wheels and returning fire. The volume of our outgoing fire tripled. The enemy fire slackened for a second. They were surprised. They thought we were dead. I knew I had to get to the radio in the lead truck. My handheld didn't have the range to reach the TOC for air support. I had to cross 50 meters of open ground under fire to get to Thorne's vehicle. I took a breath. I thought about the discharge papers in my pocket. I thought about the irony. I was about to die for a man who had tried to ruin me. But then I looked at the burning truck in front of me. I saw a hand waving from the wreckage. Someone was alive in there. I didn't think. I moved. I sprinted from cover. The world turned into a blur. I could hear the snap of bullets passing my ears, the supersonic crack that tells you it was close. I didn't run in a straight line. I zigzagged, sliding into a crater, scrambling up, diving behind a rock. I reached the burning truck. It was Corporal Mendez. His leg was pinned. He was screaming. "I got you! I got you!" I yelled, grabbing his vest. The heat was searing my eyebrows. I pulled with everything I had. The metal groaned. I heaved. Mendez slid free, screaming in agony. "Stay low!" I dragged him toward the lead MRAP. We hit the side of Thorne's vehicle just as an RPG slammed into the ground where we had been standing. The concussion knocked the wind out of me. I checked Mendez. He was unconscious but alive. I hammered on the side of the MRAP. "Open up! Open the door!" The side door cracked open. I shoved Mendez inside and climbed in after him. The inside of the MRAP was a scene of panic. Thorn was sitting in the commander's seat, pale as a sheet, staring at the map display with wide, unseeing eyes. He was trembling. He had dropped the handset. I grabbed him by the shoulder and spun him around. "Give me the coordinates! Where's the grid?" He looked at me, his lips moving but no sound coming out. He was in shock. Total combat paralysis. I shoved him aside. I looked at the Blue Force tracker screen. I got the grid. I grabbed the long-range radio. Any station. This is Vulture 3, declared emergency. Troops in contact. Grid. Mike Sierra 449er 821. Request immediate air support. Danger close. Vulture 3. This is Havoc 24. A calm voice pilot's voice crackled back. We are 2 mics out. Did you say danger close? They are on top of us. Drop it on the ridges. East and west, 100 meters from my mark. Copy. Keep your heads down, boys. Rain is coming. I looked at Thorn. He was staring at me. The fear in his eyes was being replaced by something else. Shame. Deep, crushing shame. He realized in that moment that everything he had built, his reputation, his rank, his authority, was a lie, and the man saving his life was the man he had thrown away. "Get your weapon up, Captain," I said, my voice cold. "We're not done yet." The sound of jets screamed overhead. 2 F-16s. Then, the earth shattered. The airstrike broke the ambush. The ridge lines erupted in pillars of fire and rock. The enemy fire stopped instantly. Silence returned to the valley, heavier than before. We set up a perimeter. Medevac choppers were inbound. I walked the line, checking on the men. I checked on Hayes. I checked on Davis. They looked at me differently now. Not as the guy who was leaving, not as the outcast. They looked at me with a reverence that made me uncomfortable. I found Thorn sitting on the bumper of the MR app. He had taken off his helmet. His hands were still shaking. He looked up as I approached. "Miller," he croaked. I didn't salute. I didn't stand at attention. I was a civilian now, right? "The birds are 5 minutes out, Captain," I said. "We have 4 urgent surgical, 6 walking wounded. No KIAs. We got lucky. You," he struggled with the words. "You took command. Someone had to. You violated direct orders. You operated a radio on a frequency you weren't authorized for. You endangered." He stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. He knew how hollow it sounded. "I saved your life," I said, leaning in close. "I saved your career. Because if we had died out here, the investigation would have shown that you ignored the intel on this route. They would have found the report you threw in the trash. I kept a copy, Captain." His face went white. "But I don't care about your career," I continued. "I care about these men. You want to write me up again? Go ahead. You want to court-martial me? Try it. But you and I both know who led this convoy today." Thorn looked down at his boots. He couldn't meet my gaze. He was broken. He would keep his rank, maybe. He might even get a medal for surviving this. But he would know. Every time he looked in the mirror, he would know that he was a fraud, and that the man he exiled was the better soldier. The sound of rotors filled the air. The medevac birds were landing. Dust swirled around us, golden in the late afternoon sun. I grabbed my duffel bag from the back of the surviving truck. It was scorched and torn, but my gear was inside. I walked toward the helicopter. I didn't look back at Thorn. I walked past Hayes, who gave me a nod. A slow, respectful nod. That was enough. I climbed onto the bird. As we lifted off, I looked down at the convoy, the smoking wreckage, the soldiers patching themselves up. I saw Thorn, a small, shrinking figure in the dust, standing alone. I touched the pocket of my uniform where the discharge papers were. They felt lighter now. They didn't mean anything. A piece of paper couldn't define me. A rank couldn't define me. They forced me out because I was inconvenient. They tried to bury me because I spoke the truth. But on the day they tried to erase me, I wrote my name in fire. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the vibrating wall of the helicopter. I was done. I was going home, but I was leaving with my honor intact. And in this world, that's the only victory that lasts, where loyalty ends and justice begins.